High praise equals low productivity. High praise equals low productivity. What's going on, my high vibrational individual expressions of God on earth? It's your boy, Dr. Will Rogers, aka Master Teacher 33. Today, let's break down emotional versus logical mental states. As a mental health, as a behavioral modification, and more importantly, a life coach, a peak production life coach, how to address mental states, specifically mental health, from the perspective of being able to overcome negative habit patterns, being able to identify coping mechanisms. One of the things from a psychological and a biological perspective. That's why I do one-on-ones, that's why I do counseling, which is why I do what I do, because I had to address my own issues, because I was destroying my own life and I was sabotaging my own success. And what I've learned over the last 30 plus years of behavioral modification and looking at it from a psychological and from a mental brain chemistry perspective, there's two types. Women are usually more emotionally oriented. Not all, of course. Can't make a blank statement. Men usually are more reasonable and logical. Again, not all, because you can't make a blank statement. We're all individuals, I understand. But basically, when we're looking at these two states, emotional versus logical. Now, when you understand how the brain works, and let me show you a graph that I found on the internet. You can look up this stuff as well. It's very, very interesting from a mental health perspective. We're seeing the states of the mind. So it's not either one. It's not the emotional brain or the logical brain. We want to operate in the wise brain. We want to understand how the mind works. That's the first step to mastering the mind, to making better choices and better decisions, and not just blaming everything on God or the devil. So when we let our emotions take over, let's examine the emotional mind. These are the attributes and characteristics that we primarily see them primarily in women. We see, they're very emotionally driven. Again, some, not all. Emotionally or emotional driven, impulsive, subjective, reaction, and protective. I said when we let our emotions take over, we become very, very impulsive, very reactive, emotionally driven. But then if we go over to the other side, where most men are at, we are, very reasonable, very logical. We deal with facts and evidence. We're very analytical, very objective. And we have low or no emotional connection. So we can see that, again, it's not the emotional brain or the logical brain where we want to really operate in the middle. Whole brain, what I call cladonomics, in this case, this diagram talks about the wise brain. So when we act from a rational mind, again, we can make decisions that are grounded in facts, that are grounded in, again, logic and clarity. But life isn't just about logic. Life also is about emotions. So that's why we need both. So the key is to find the middle ground. And the middle ground is what is called in this diagram the wise mind. It's mindful. It merges both emotion and reason. It allows for deeper understanding, for us to be patient, and for us to be able to distinguish logic from common sense. Basically, to be able to incorporate both logic and common sense. And so that's when, especially when we're dealing with relationships, man, it's important for us to understand and create that space for us, for your mate. And ladies, vice versa. For men, we operate in reason and logic. So the key, again, is to find the middle ground. To find that space where, again, both parties, regardless of how you think, there is no right or wrong manner or right or wrong way to think. We're just different. Men are wired a little differently from women. Again, it's not bad, it's not good. That's just the way God created us. But then we got the second part of that we have to address. First, you got to own the way that you think. Because the way that you think is not bad. It's not good. That's just the way the big Jesus designed and gifted you to be. It is your job to be comfortable and to be happy in your own skin. Don't try to change the way God designed you just to please somebody else. You got to be you, 100% you. You got to be authentic. You got to love the skin that you're in. You got to be totally 100%. And you got to address, you got to be able to correct, make any psychological adjustments, which gets into the second part from a spiritual Christian perspective, especially. As you guys know, there's levels to this game. And what I do for a living is to assist people with moving from different levels. If you want to stay like Hebrews 6:1, if you want to stay on the basic level, Jesus Christ and crucified, or if you want to go and become mature, as it says in Hebrews chapter 6, verses 1, 2, and 3, you got to move up. You got to expand your consciousness and expand your awareness, which is what I've done. That creates more of a stable mental disposition where you can use reason and logic and love and compassion, and then you're able to pull back and stop releasing or giving a false positive. And so what's happening, or what happens a lot in psychology from an emotional perspective, it interferes with, due to the feeling of euphoria that is released, where the brain assumes, because remember, observation is productivity. Observation leads to productivity. So whatever you observe, so if you stop observing things, so when you focus on a negative habit pattern, the brain will create more negative habit patterns, because that's the focus. Again, that's the psychology. And that's the biology behind under, over, and understand it from behavioral, psychological, from a behavioral modification, from what I call cognitive therapy, from under, over, and understanding claronomics. We got to tap into the emotional states, because these emotional states trick the brain, and the brain releases dopamine. That's why watching TV, watching, especially these series like on Netflix and so on, it brings about a temporary release of stress, because of the way that the human brain works, because you are observing something. So when you observe something, or when you release that tension of the brain, it does give a temporary, it's temporary though. It releases, and it creates this temporary sense that the trauma or the external situation or the external event has been solved when it has not been solved. And so that's why we see high praise equals low productivity, especially within the melanated community. And so again, I'm not against the praise. It's important to just over understand that it can create a false positive, because the brain will literally think that the problem has been addressed because you release the chemicals in the brain through praise. And this release again creates this dopamine without discipline. And it's very important to over understand that you need both. So again, in addition to the praise, you need to take some actionable steps. You have to combine. You need both, because the worship can trigger. It does trigger dopamine and oxytocin and melatonin and endorphins, and all the feel-good chemicals of the brain can be released. But there has to be some systems of accountability. There has to be some systems of responsibility, and there has to be some systems of ownership. Because when you tap into and establish those systems of accountability, when you tap into and you establish a system of, again, ownership. So it's ownership, accountability, and responsibility. Ownership. You got to take ownership of it. That was the hardest thing for me to do, because it was very easy for me to project my flaws, because I was sabotaging myself. It was no demons, no devils. It was just a lack of cognitive behavior. It's a lack of over understanding that as a man born in September, understanding my innate attributes and characteristics, that I was very reasonable and logical. Okay, but you need reason and logic plus love and compassion. So you can't, you need both. You got to, that's whole brain thinking, not just left brain, not just right brain. So you just can't do praise and worship and high praise and low productivity. But you can't do low productivity and high praise. So you need high praise and high productivity. That's what peak performance is. So what I do is I assist people with establishing high productivity. We got the praise down, especially in the melanated community. So we don't have to take no classes on praise and worship. We just need to take classes on understanding how to establish specific step-by-step actionable steps, things that you can implement in your own life every day to hold yourself accountable, to hold yourself responsible, and to take 100% ownership of whatever's going on in your life. Because when you are engaging in and you are having these spiritual, these high, we go to church and we get this very, very high release. We feel the presence of God and it's powerful. And so when you are in the presence of God and you feel this presence, and worship should energize you, but it should energize you to take action. After praise, whether you go to church, whether you meditate at home, whether you go out into the woods, where you get up in the morning and do your earthing, where you do the Wim Hof breathing technique, where you do, sauna, where you do cold shower, all of this is a way to release pent up, or energy. Remember, I talk about exercise as exorcism. That's why sometimes you see me I'll exercise 3 times a day, because exercise is exorcism. But after I exercise, I still have to engage in purpose-based productivity. In other words, you should establish light bill paying activities. That's what I call it. So what I'm doing right now is it putting money in the bank. See, especially in the melanated community, man, we like to party. We like to crack jokes. We like to have fun, jazz. Don't get me wrong. Hey, I like some good music and all that stuff. None of that puts money in your PayPal account. None of that, like what I'm doing right now, unless it leads to, which I do have. That's why you always see me make offers. To make more money, make more offers. So again, it's very important. I'm not against praise. I'm not against the church. I'm not against religion. I'm not against partying. I'm not against all of the stuff, but there has to be ownership. There has to be responsibility. There has to be accountable. High praise should not equal low productivity. But a lot of times that's what I see. I see churches everywhere. I see every Sunday we go to church and we throw down. And we have a great time. That's awesome. Then Monday morning comes. What happens after that? There has to be a emotional connection to economic empowerment. There has to be an emotional connection to economic empowerment. I know money is the root of all evil. I know we talk about money a lot. And I know a lot of people don't like to talk about money. But if there is a lack of economic empowerment because of a lack of mental infrastructure, I know in my own life personally, the lack of economic empowerment was a result of a lack of proper economic mental infrastructure, because I wasn't raised in an environment reading the Wall Street Journal and learning how to invest in stocks and bonds, and learning how to invest my money, learning how to make my money make money. I was raised where you go up, get education, you get a job, and you exchange time for dollars. Most people were not taught to save the principal and use the principal to create interest. Spend the interest, never spend the principal. So we teach people, especially from the church perspective, that they should tithe. But we don't really teach people how to budget to create extra income so that they can tithe. So if there's a requirement to tithe, there should also be a requirement to budget. If you want someone to tithe, you also should teach that person to budget. So that way they know how. Same thing with programming. If you want to spend a lot of time in praise and worship, we should spend a lot of time in programming and pattern recognition. If you request someone and you want high praise, there should also be high programming and pattern recognition. So we can see the fact that we are observing the wrong patterns, because the process of observation is the process of participation based upon mental health and the brain. The brain does not tell the difference. The reticular activating system, whatever you frequent creates frequency, currency. Whatever you currently see creates currency, positively or negatively. So if you are currently seeing observation, the brain thinks observation is participation. You can prove it just by watching a movie. You create a feeling. You watch a scary movie, you get a scary feeling. You watch comedy, you get comedy. You watch, pornography, you get, that feeling. So you feel based upon what you see. And so it's very important that we over and understand how the brain works. I'm not against all the spiritual stuff. I think we got that covered. We are very spiritual people. But we must understand that we have to incorporate into our theology, we must incorporate biology and cosmology to understand how it's affecting our theology in order for us to be highly productive while still maintaining high praise. For more information, you already know I got the book and the audio. So pick up the new book and the new audio, High Praise, Low Productivity. This your boy, Dr. Will Rogers, a.k.a. Master Teacher 33. I'm at the top of grinding and shining. You already know what to do. Come join me. God bless you.